When it comes to the Dromaeosaurians, the group of theropod dinosaurs, colloquially termed raptors, much to the ornithologists' dismay, there is a huge assortment of them to choose from if you need one for your dinosaur monster movie. There are plenty much larger than the comparatively puny forms in Jurassic Park. There are many of the same size and far more of rather small size. The worst choices to make would be those known from very fragmentary fossils. And just such a choice was made for the latest Jurassic World sequel. Such a choice that has had its consequences on both Google searches and the Jurassic franchise beyond Dominion. Let's take a look at the real animal behind the monstrous laser or flute-controlled biological weapons of the film and show, Atrociraptor. Hey, while I have your attention, I have two other channels you should check out when you get a chance. Edge of Reality is where I talk about cryptids and the paranormal, anything that is creepy, crawly, and outside of the realm of science. Edge's World of Monsters is where I tackle basically anything fictitious, whether that be kaiju or dragons. Dromaeosaurs, the raptor dinosaurs, are some of the most famous groups of dinosaurs. They have their place right alongside the tyrannosaurs, spinosaurs, and allosaurs. However, most of their fossil record comes out of Asia. Those dromaeosaurs from North America are oddly rarely so fragmentary as to be nearly useless or downright dubious. For example, the worst North American dromaeosaur is probably Atrociraptor, a small Hell Creek cousin of Velociraptor known from just a single maxilla, or upper jaw, and the dentary, or the front half of the lower jaw. The next worst is the late Cretaceous Canadian Boreonychus, known from a handful of pieces from across the skeleton. It's followed by the New Mexican Dromaeosaurians, known from many of the long bones, some skull bits, and a few other pieces from here and there. That's about it. Everything else is actually pretty good. Deinonychus, Dromaeosaurus, Utahraptor, Bambiraptor, and Ornithologists are all known from relatively complete to damn near complete specimens. So if you were going to make a monster movie that happens to have dinosaurs involved, and you wanted another large dromaeosaur as an evil counterpart to your good oversized dromaeosaurs, which would you choose? Probably any one of the handful of known North American forms that I just listed. Against all reason, whoever was in charge of picking dinosaurs for Jurassic World Dominion decided to go with one of the very few really fragmentary dromaeosaurs known from North America, a form I deliberately left out of my short list, but that slots in right after Atrociraptor in being just completely awful. Atrociraptor. Before I get ahead of myself, let's go on a short trip through recent history to understand the hows and whys of this not entirely unusual raptor. Back in 1995, the interim between Jurassic Park and Jurassic Park: The Lost World, a fossil collector by the name of Wayne Marshall was prospecting on land about 3 miles or 5 kilometers from the Royal Tyrrell Museum of Paleontology in Drumheller, Alberta, Canada, when he discovered little bits of fossil skull material eroding down a slope. Once he picked up all the flotsam and followed their trail to their origin point, he came eye to eye with an ancient saurian face peeking out from within a rocky outcrop. That rocky outcrop would turn out to belong to the Horseshoe Canyon Formation, specifically about 5 meters above what is called the Daly Coal Seam No. 7, making the rocks Upper Campanian or Lower Maastrichtian in age, so the very latest of the late Cretaceous. As a good ethical fossil collector, Wayne knew all about what specimens were fine to collect and which would be better for a museum to collect, so he contacted the staff at the museum to come out and take a look at what he'd found. After all, Wayne had previously been a technician in the skeletal mounting shop at the museum in the mid-1980s, in preparation for the opening of the museum. Once he got a hold of world-renowned Phil Curry and gave him what he had found, Curry and a team from the museum went out and collected the rest of the specimen. Wayne would go on to find dozens of specimens for the museum over the following decades. Once the remains were taken back to the museum staff set to work removing as much matrix from the specimen as seemed reasonable. However, this task was a tad difficult because the matrix, or lithified sediment surrounding the fossil, was hard sandstone, requiring high-powered tools and lots of work that was probably more annoying than difficult. Slow going and murder for the old posture. Anyways, once everything that could be done with the specimen was done, this is what it looked like, as it appears today. The specimen consists of both premaxillae, the bones that make up the front of the snout and half of the nostril openings, the right maxilla, the upper jawbone, the right dentary, the frontmost bone of the lower jaw, chunks of the left half of this dentary bone, a bunch of teeth, and a bunch of shards of bone from indeterminate parts of the body. With all of this observable, its identity remained a specimen of a new genus and species of theropod dinosaur until folks were able to spend the time to describe and name it, which was done by Phil Curry and David Varicchio in the 2004 book Feathered Dragons by Indiana University Press. In this tome, the authors found that the front half of the face of the animal belonged to a theropod dinosaur which belonged to the Dromaeosaurian family, specifically as a close relative of the famous Deinonychus, as part of the Velociraptorinae subfamily. As it happens, the front half of this animal's face doesn't contain autapomorphies, which are unique diagnostic features found in fossil animals that can be used to definitively separate it from all other known members of a group. However, the author team were confident the animal was unique from other known raptors because of its unique combination of various anatomical traits not seen in any other raptors. So, no one feature sets it apart, but it's the combination of its variously generic features that does it. With all that out of the way, the author team named the new animal Atrociraptor marshalli, with atroci meaning savage, raptor meaning thief or Caesar, and the species name in honor of Wayne. The front half of the skull indicates a heavier build than one might suspect of the Velociraptorinae group, which commonly have low, long skulls. Another interesting aspect is the shape and direction of the teeth. They bend backwards a lot more than basically any other dromaeosaur known in 2004. They are all pretty much the same size as well. There is no difference in tooth size. They are also J-shaped in cross-section rather than D or oval. Considering so little is known from Atrociraptor, getting an idea of what the animal may have looked like is basically an educated guessing game of inference. The front half of the face is indeed from a deep-snouted dromaeosaur, but the interesting shape and size of the teeth may indicate an animal adapted for an ecological niche not seen in other contemporary raptors. This could mean that the rest of its head, and subsequently the rest of the body, looked a bit different than either its contemporaries or its close relatives. In order to actually start filling in those missing pieces, I think it would behoove us to actually take a look at the phylogenetic nonsense this nonsense dinosaur has gone through since 2004. To make a bunch of scientific word salad short, a 2009 paper found it as a relative of Ornithologists as part of the group Ornithologists, possibly along with Raptor and Raptor. But then a 2012 paper argued that the results of every past analyses were so different as to make the whole thing nonsense to begin with. Followed by a 2013 paper that once again found Atrociraptor as a close cousin to Deinonychus, both of which were within their own group, outside of and more advanced than any of the other Dromaeosaurian subfamilies. Next up, a 2015 paper on the dubious Dakota raptor found the same Atroci-Dino partnership, but within the Dromaeosaurinae group, all of which has resulted in the most recent 2020's analyses of dromaeosaurs, which has taken into account much more data than ever before. The new analyses tend to all use the same matrix of data, with a bunch of experts constantly updating it with every new dromaeosaur found, so it becomes more and more accurate over time. These works have found Atrociraptor to belong within a Ornithologists grouping once again, with the Canadian short-skulled Ornithologists. It's just backed up with better data these days. Okay, great. So one can just fill in the missing pieces of Atrociraptor with Ornithologists, right? Well, that seems to be the general tact used by many paleoartists. It's not entirely wrong. After all, many dromaeosaurs retained rather similar proportions to one another, differing in skull shapes or robusticity. Considering the face of Atrociraptor has consistently been associated with other shorter-skulled raptors, like Deinonychus and Ornithologists, the back half of its skull can be reliably reconstructed as also being robust and short. Dromaeosaurus and Ornithologists also both have moderately large nasal openings and eye sockets, so it may be reasonable to infer the same in Atrociraptor. Aside from that, most other dromaeosaurs that are not super robust giants like Utahraptor and Achilobacter, semi-aquatic goose-like critters such as the Huscaraptorines, or super swift fish-eating snooties like the Unenlaginae, tend to have short torsos, long limbs with short feet, long arms that fold in more than any other non-bird theropod, long hands, and long tails that were semi-fused together with long rods of bone or cartilage that projected out from each vertebra to hug every subsequent vertebra. The majority of fossil feathers tend to be from this group of dinosaurs, and at every size aside from the biggest ones. So it's a near implausibility that Atrociraptor was naked. Considering the quill knobs in the forearms of Velociraptor and the extensive wing and tail feathers in critters as large as the Chinese Zhenyuanlong, it's probable that Atrociraptor also had large wings and a big tail fan. Now that we have a very tentative hypothetical look for Atrociraptor, how about a size? Let's bring in
Mr. Man from Animal Planet's The Most Extreme
to help out with that. Based on the size, Atrociraptor was small, but might be lumped into the lower ends of the medium-sized class of raptors. It has been estimated to be 1.8 to 2 meters, 5.9 to 6.6 feet in length, and with a weight of 15 kilograms, 33 pounds. Not much larger than Velociraptor, but not much smaller than Dromaeosaurus. It may seem small to us, but an Atrociraptor would definitely give you quite a bit of trouble if it wanted to. Thanks, Mr. Man. Pretty much nothing can be said of its behavior, but if it had anatomy anything like most of the other completely known dromaeosaurs, then it may have employed the raptor prey restraint method that has been hypothesized for these animals in the past, which is simply that the critters pinned the smaller prey with their foot talons while they tore it apart with their jaws while the prey was still alive, possibly using the wings to further batter the prey into submission. Speaking of which, what was it going after when it was alive? The Horseshoe Canyon Formation is an incredibly thoroughly studied unit of rock. Even the narrowest of members or submembers of the unit are known and described. Atrociraptor lived at a time when the western interior seaway was beginning to shrink. It would never fully go away until millions of years after the KPG mass extinction, but it had definitely receded a bit by the time of Tyrannosaurus. Since Atrociraptor was a full-on northerner, it had a lot less flat land to live in. The Proto-Rocky Mountains had already begun their ascent and would not bridge the left and right halves of the North American continent till the middle and end of the Maastrichtian Age of the latest Cretaceous. Aside from that, this area of Canada would have been around 8 degrees further northward than today, which oxymoronically meant higher general temperatures. The region in which Atrociraptor lived was wetter and hotter than today, with swamps, rivers, and all sorts of fluvial systems, enough to make your geomorphology teacher blush. Among the high water table lived all sorts of little critters: sturgeons and herrings, the Choristodeer, Champsosaurus, Plesiosaur, Lurospondylus, the turtle Basilames, Alligatoroid, Stangerochamsa, and possibly the wolverine otter, Didelphodon. The major fossil stars of this rock unit were the dinosaurs, which included the fleshy-crested Edmontosaurus regalis, helmeted Hypacrosaurus altispinus, and nub-headed Saurolophus osborni, the giant clubbed Ionodontosaurus, shoulder-braced Edmontonia, and the famous Euoplocephalus, plus a whole cornucopia of horned dinosaurs like Anchiceratops, Rhinoceratops, Eotriceratops, Montanoceratops, and Pachyrhinosaurus. The Thessaliosaur, Parksosaurus, may have been on the Atrociraptor menu, as it was a relatively small ornithopod that was without many defenses, aside from its speed. If Atrociraptor could avoid the domed head, it may have also made short work of the small Spherotholus. Other theropods that filled in the world of the savage thief was the troodontid Albertovenator, Alvarezsaurid Albertonicus, the Oviraptorosaurs Apatoraptor, and Epicyrocenotes. A little large for Atrociraptor were the ostrich dinos Dromaeosaurians, Ornithomimus, and Struthiomimus. Near the top of the ecological food web were the Tyrannosaurs, Albertosaurus, and Daspletosaurus. Quite a well-understood chunk of time and space. Now, enough with the real animal. I baited you with the criticism of Jurassic World Dominion. However, this video is not a review of the film, so I will stash away any creative criticisms I have for the film itself. Instead, let's take a brief look at their Atrociraptor. Considering at this point you've sat through the entirety of this video, you are probably already more than aware of how far off the Jurassic World Atrociraptor is to the real-world animal. But just to be clear, the one in the film is naked, has broken wrists, and is 2 to 3 times the size. Now, the skull does look a little weird and off to me, but considering how only the front half of the real Atrociraptor skull is known, I don't feel like being too obtusely critical about it. I will say though, that dromaeosaur skulls are all rather thin from side to side, except for the back of the skull where all the important sensory parts and jaw muscles are. The only dromaeosaurs that really had big square skulls were the Utahraptor type raptors. The issue with the Jurassic Park / Jurassic World dromaeosaurs has been talked about to death for the last 30 years, so I don't feel like relitigating it here. But the real Utahraptor was quite a bit longer than the Jurassic Raptor archetype, but it wasn't much taller. That is due to the very weird and unnatural proportions that the Jurassic Raptors tend to have, where they are too tall for how short they are, with the legs being very robust but also exceptionally long, and then having an incredibly short torso and humanoid shoulders and chests. The raptors aren't the dinosaurs that are the most inaccurate, so I would like to express that I personally give a lot of leeway when it comes to them, but damn do I not like them. The skull of the Jurassic Atrociraptor does seem to give off more of the vibe of Utahraptor, or even other theropod dinosaurs like Abelisaurs, Tyrannosaurs, or even a lot of primitive saurischians like Herrerasaurus. Anyways, this is the very unorganized thesis for why Atrociraptor is a garbage choice for an evil raptor for a Jurassic World film. Echelobiter was right there. It's far more complete and smaller than Utahraptor. If you were to say that they chose Atrociraptor for the cool name, I would like to subjectively point out that Echelobiter has the same number of syllables, and even is another name that starts with A. However, I guess a point does go to the inclusion of the word raptor in it, which is an incredibly dumb guy thing to be drawn to, but maybe raptor is more marketable. In which case, Utahraptor is again right there. Deinonychus is like the second or third most famous dromaeosaur and was even the basis of inspiration for the original Jurassic Park raptors, so why not go with that too? It's neither here nor there, but now we have yet another pop culture raptor monster that you have to tell people was way smaller in real life. Except this time the real animal is half of a face, rather than dozens of complete specimens a la Velociraptor. Despite everything I just said, I can understand the overall point to picking and choosing super fragmentary and barely known genera of dinosaurs for your dinosaur film. The fragmentary nature technically allows full creative control to make it look however you want. After all, no one really knows for sure exactly what the dinosaur in question looked like. But I will counter this line of thought thusly. It completely overlooks the work that goes into inferring features in extinct animals using living animals, digital tests, and much more. Like, yes, technically no one knows what Atrociraptor looks like, but there is like 100 years worth of work by dozens of scientists that has built upon itself to damn near precisely prove certain anatomical traits, behavior, and more in these animals. There's a reason why it's called an educated guess. The cynical reason for use of fragmentary animals is copyright. You can more easily copyright a dinosaur design that you make up for a known dinosaur than if you were to make it look more natural. I'm no copyright expert, so this may be way off, but it, seems right. To counter so much negativity, using a barely known genus of dinosaur is incredibly good though. It allows for far more scientific outreach. It gets boring to talk about the same Tyrannosaurs, Allosaurs, Spinosaurs, Velociraptor over and over again. Using something like Atrociraptor provides people with more information, a spark to begin researching more and more about not just dinos or paleontology, but maybe also the world around them. While we're on the topic of Atrociraptor in pop culture, let's take a look at the only other time it has appeared, Prehistoric Planet. In the 5th and final episode of Season 1 of Prehistoric Planet, Forests, Atrociraptor makes an appearance. The first dinosaur we see in the Forest Fire segment of Forests is the most fragmentary dinosaur in the entire show, Atrociraptor. The Prehistoric Planet Atrociraptor is decked out in a bland cinnamon color with a lighter strawberry blonde undercoat and a dark gray muzzle. There is, as Darren notes, no doubts whatsoever that these animals were covered in feathers, with plumage as complete as that of a modern bird. The forearms of this Atrociraptor are fully decked out in all of the complex to semi-complex feathers we know the entire group had. A ton of Dromaeosaur specimens don't preserve their wing feathers, or any feathers for that matter. The vast majority of those that do are small and were uncovered in China, those being the gliding Microraptorines and the velociraptor-sized ground-dwelling Zhenhuanlong. Plenty of theropods that are related to the true dromaeosaurs are found with simpler feathers akin to those on emus, or even simpler ones that look like hair. Tyrannosaurs, Oviraptorosaurs, Therizinosaurs, Scansoriopterids, and then a bunch more advanced bird-like theropods such as troodontids, avialans, and true birds. There aren't any large body members of the Dromaeosaurian subgroup that contains the majority of the things we informally call raptors with feathers preserved yet. However, there is a single specimen of Velociraptor or something very much like Velociraptor that contains a series of notches on the arm bone. These notches are the same thing seen in birds, quill knobs. Their presence directly proves that the animal had feathers. The interpretation from this is that the majority of these animals had similarly complex wing feathers as Velociraptor, and all other dromaeosaur relatives that did have wings preserved. As with the Velociraptors and Dromaeosauruses, the Atrociraptor has a ring of thicker tissues around the margins of the mouth. This looks somewhat like a beak, but is likely composed of simple lip tissues, hardened skin, or partially keratinized skin. The point of using Atrociraptor in this segment was not to show you any hypotheses about what it looked like, as those wouldn't be of any use. Instead, the point was to show you a bit of behavior that we see in many modern dinosaurs. Smoke insecticide. Birds use ash for bathing as it suffocates parasites, but a few birds deliberately hold their wings over smoke or fire. It's not entirely sure why they do this. To kill pests, to cause feathers to change shape, they do this when heated, or just for fun. Many birds ant by applying ants and certain substances to their plumage for maintenance. Captive corvids may do so with smoke, flames, matches, and cigarettes. This behavior is mostly limited to intelligent birds, mostly corvids, so an argument could be made that it shouldn't be depicted in an animal like a dromaeosaur, which were known to not be quite as intelligent as the smartest living dinosaurs. While nobody is arguing that dromaeosaurs were of corvid-like intelligence, the possibility that they were relatively intelligent is on the table, and Dr. Naish suggests that people take seriously the suggestion that these animals could well have surprised us in flexibility, innovation, and smarts. He cautions to remember that even animals traditionally considered stupid, such as fish and lizards, have proven quite adept at complex tasks and even tool use. Most of these animals don't have hands or live in water, so doing spectacular displays of intelligence is hard to do. Just because something is hard to do doesn't mean they are incapable of doing so, it just means it rarely happens when a human is around to see it. That's pretty much it for the PHP Atrociraptor, a very good take on the animal, as opposed to its debut in Dominion. Though I will throw in the bone that since Dominion, I think the Atrociraptors have been used expertly in the story. They are what people wanted out of raptors and are appropriately frightening. The makers of the Netflix animated series have been able to throw in some minor characterization for them here and there too, so that there is an implication of something more than just a monster underneath the skin. Now you know the dirty truth behind Atrociraptor. For more interesting stories about nature, the history of life, or what goes bump in the night, subscribe, like this video, drop a comment in the comment section below, and hit the bell icon to stay in the know with everything Edge. Thanks for watching.